In this lecture, we'll take a look at the confusing system of ducts and tubes that drain the wastes as well as the sexual products of vertebrates. In short, the urogenital system. This organ system is two-in-one system. Firstly, the urinary system is what's responsible for maintaining water and salt balance in our body fluids. We want to make sure that we don't have too little or too much of either so our cells can function properly. The urinary system is also responsible for eliminating the byproducts of metabolism, especially protein metabolism. These products can include ammonia, which can be toxic when accumulated. In the process of doing its job, the urinary system produces urine, a fluid that contains all the unneeded and bad stuff. The major organs of the urinary system are the kidneys and its ducts that drain the urine. The genital system, or also called as the reproductive system, is mainly concerned with the production of gametes or sex cells. The system includes the gonads and the ducts that either carry the sperm or the eggs. While the system is not crucial to the survival of the animal, unlike the urinary system, it's vital for the survival of the germline so that the animal can pass on its genes, which is the end goal of all organisms from an evolutionary point of view. We often examine them together because they have a very close relationship, both in terms of development and their anatomy. Embryologically, both come from the mesomere or intermediate mesoderm, and their closeness is also reflected in the way they share some of their pipes, as you'll see later. So you can't have one without the other. To understand what the urinary system does, let's use the mammalian kidneys as a model. In terms of gross anatomy, it's composed of a pair of kidneys which have a retroperitoneal position located on the back side of the abdominal or peritoneal cavity. And then the urine that will be produced by these kidneys will be drained by these pair of ureters. The urine will now be stored into the urinary bladder until nature calls, and it will be flushed into the urethra out of the body. Looking closely at the kidneys, the renal artery delivers fresh, oxygenated blood to it. This blood also contains the wastes to be eliminated in the urine. The renal vein collects the filtered blood. And histologically, the kidney is divided into an outer cortex and an inner medulla. Within the substance of the kidneys are thousands of these uriniferous tubules working 24/7 to keep your body in proper chemical condition. These tubules are not randomly arranged in the kidney substance. Their segments have a precise order, which we'll look at in the next slide. So for example, certain segments can be found only in the cortex, others in the medulla. For now, suffice it to say that the blood is filtered first from the cortex, producing the urine, and this urine will flow from the cortex to the medulla, gradually being modified in terms of its chemical composition, like which substances need to be reabsorbed or which ones we can do without and let it flush with the urine. The final urine then trickles down into an expanded portion of the ureter inside the kidney. This portion is called the renal pelvis, serving as a sort of collecting funnel for the urine. Now let's look closely at those uriniferous tubules. The uriniferous tubule is the functional unit that forms urine. It's divided into the nephron, or the nephric tubule, and the collecting tubules, sometimes called the collecting ducts. Now, the proximal end of the nephron is expanded into a cup-shaped structure called the renal capsule, sometimes called the Bowman's capsule. And this capsule is in close juxtaposition with the tufts of thin-walled capillaries called glomerulus. So the glomerulus plus the renal capsule create a renal corpuscle, from which the blood plasma is first filtrated. Small substances, including most waste products and ions, pass freely through the thin walls of the glomerulus, but larger molecules like proteins and cells are retained inside the blood. The ultrafiltrate produced is then collected by the renal capsule. As it passes through the different segments of the nephron, its chemical composition is modified, reabsorbing most important substances like sugars and amino acids that came with a glomerular filtrate. Water can also be reabsorbed depending on the needs of the organism. Water reabsorption can occur in the intermediate segment of the nephron or the collecting tubules. Reabsorbed substances then re-enter the bloodstream via the peritubular capillaries surrounding the tubules. The urinary system developed from the portion of the mesomere called the nephric ridge, running along the longitudinal axis of the embryo. This ridge forms segmental nephrotomes from which the uriniferous tubules will develop. Let's take a look at the nephrotome in cross-section. During development, the medial end of the nephrotome differentiates into the first part of the nephron, which is the renal capsule, into which the glomerulus will grow into, coming from the dorsal aorta. The lateral ends of the nephrotomes grow outward and fuse with each other to form a nephric duct. This is different from the collecting duct we saw earlier, which only collects urine from one or two nephrons, but the nephric duct is a more macroscopic structure, collecting all the urine produced by the kidney. So we've already mentioned one type of nephric duct, the ureters, and there are other types of duct depending on how they develop. We'll see that later. Notice also how the nephrotome remains connected to the coelom via ciliated peritoneal funnels, which is believed to be a primitive feature. So the nephrotome, aside from being able to filter the blood, can also filter the coelomic fluid. Eventually, in most vertebrates, this funnel closes. Vertebrates have three different types of kidneys based on where they develop from the long nephric ridge. The pronephros develops from the cranial portion of this ridge, whereas the mesonephros develop from the middle portion. The metanephros sprouts from the caudal portion of this nephric ridge. Let's start with the pronephric kidneys. These kidneys are perhaps the most primitive, and they develop, as I said, from the cranial portion of the nephric ridge. It is usually functional only in the embryonic or larval stages. A few vertebrate species make use of pronephric kidneys in their adult stage. And because it is believed to be the first vertebrate kidney, the nephric duct draining the pronephros is called an archinephric duct. In most fishes and amphibians, the pronephros will be replaced in the adult by the mesonephros. And the nephric duct that will drain the mesonephros is still the archinephric duct, borrowed from the original pronephros. But to differentiate, some manuals specify if the archinephric duct is pronephric or mesonephric, depending on the type of kidney it currently serves. But it's basically the same archinephric duct. As a later derived feature of amniotes, the metanephric kidney buds out from the caudal portion of the nephric ridge. The metanephric duct is also a new structure and is often named in mammals as the ureter. The metanephric duct replaces the archinephric duct in draining the urine.